Greetings, dear subscribers and casual listeners of my channel. Harry Potter has always been seen as the embodiment of Gryffindor ideals, bravery, selflessness, a relentless pursuit of justice. But from the very beginning, his path wasn't so straightforward. As early as his second year, Harry faced a deep identity crisis. In Dumbledore's office, he spoke to the Sorting Hat, which bluntly told him he would have made a great Slytherin. And with each passing year at Hogwarts, it becomes more and more clear the Hat might not have been wrong. Today, let's take a look at the actions of Harry Potter that clearly reveal his inner Slytherin. Enjoy the video. Number 1. He used the Imperious Curse in Gringotts. One of the strongest arguments in favor of Harry's inner Slytherin is his willingness to cross moral lines in pursuit of a greater goal. In Deathly Hallows, while infiltrating Gringotts, Harry casts the Imperious Curse on a goblin, one of the 3 unforgivable curses. No hesitation, no real training, just cold, calculated action. Legally, that's a crime punishable by Azkaban, but for Harry, defeating Voldemort was more important than any law. He acted with a cool head, like a true strategist, his Slytherin side showing in full force. Number 2. He used Sectum Sempra on Draco Malfoy. In Half-Blood Prince, Harry discovers an old textbook filled with notes by the mysterious Half-Blood Prince. One spell in particular, Sectum Sempra, is marked for enemies. Without fully understanding what it does, Harry uses it during a duel with Draco and ends up seriously injuring him. This impulsive and dangerous act reveals Harry's inner shadow and his willingness to use power without understanding the consequences. That kind of ruthless decisiveness? Pure Slytherin. Number 3. He cast Crucio on Bellatrix. Sirius Black's death at the hands of Bellatrix Lestrange was a personal tragedy for Harry. Chasing after her, he resorts to the Cruciatus Curse, another unforgivable, driven not by duty but by revenge. This wasn't just an emotional outburst, it was a deliberate attempt to inflict pain. Though the curse didn't fully work, as Bellatrix herself notes, you have to really mean it. The fact that he used it at all speaks volumes about the darkness inside him, the Slytherin edge. Number 4. He wanted to beat Cedric in the Triwizard Tournament. Harry never asked to be a hero. He didn't want to compete in the Triwizard Tournament, but once he was in it, something awakened. Ambition. Especially near the end, he wanted to beat Cedric, wanted the glory, wanted to prove he deserved to win. That drive to be first, to take the cup, even if it meant not cooperating, echoes classic Slytherin ambition. In the end, he made the Gryffindor choice and offered to share the victory with Cedric. But the inner conflict was undeniable. Number 5. He constantly broke school rules, using the invisibility cloak. Cleverness, boldness, and the ability to work outside the system, a perfect blend of Gryffindor courage and Slytherin cunning. From first year, Harry was constantly breaking school rules, not for mischief, but for a purpose. The invisibility cloak became his loyal ally. He snuck into the restricted section of the library, spied on enemies, investigated the school's secrets. These actions took not just bravery, but a sharp mind, a hallmark of Slytherin ingenuity. Number 6. He freed Dobby through trickery. At the end of his second year, Harry pulled off an elegant move. He returned Tom Riddle's diary to Lucius Malfoy, hiding a sock inside. When Malfoy handed the book to Dobby, the elf found the clothing and was freed. Harry secured justice, not with a heartfelt plea, but with clever subterfuge. That's textbook Slytherin strategy, turning the rules against their creators. Neat, quiet, and effective. Harry outwitted a grown dark wizard with nothing but smarts and stealth. Number 7. He spoke Parseltongue. One of Harry's earliest and most mysterious traits was his ability to speak Parseltongue, the language of snakes. This ability was traditionally seen as a mark of Salazar Slytherin's descendants, the founder obsessed with blood purity and possessor of this rare magic. When the Heir of Slytherin mystery surfaced in Chamber of Secrets, suspicion fell on Harry. Even his friends grew wary, and yet, despite this ominous gift, Harry stayed firmly on the side of good. But his very nature? Deeply Slytherin. Number 8. Manipulated Professor Slughorn. The night was quiet, the air heavy with the smell of decay from Aragog's funeral. Slughorn sat slumped in an armchair, glass in hand, his guard down. Harry didn't push, he didn't beg. He waited. Then he leaned in. "Professor, you knew my mother," he said softly. That was the key. Lily Evans, Slughorn's weakness. Harry didn't lie, but he carefully played the truth like a finely tuned harp. He watched the old man's face twist in guilt. "She was one of my favourites," Slughorn whispered. "The trap was set." Harry guided the conversation like a Slytherin diplomat. He didn't reveal Dumbledore's orders. He didn't make demands. He let the professor fall into his own conscience. "She wouldn't want you to hide this," Harry said. "It wasn't force, it was precision, and it worked." Slughorn gave up the memory, one that held the secret of Horcruxes. Harry had manipulated a master manipulator, not through power, but through timing, psychology, and subtle pressure, the kind of move that Salazar Slytherin would have applauded. Number 9. Didn't forgive Marietta Edgecombe. Marietta Edgecombe walked into Umbridge's office and gave up Dumbledore's army with a single sentence. She didn't shout, she didn't explain, she simply betrayed them. And when the ink revealed the word sneak across her face in angry red pustules, Hermione's curse at work, Harry didn't flinch. He didn't rush to her defense. He didn't ask Hermione to undo it. He just watched. "She got what she deserved," he muttered later. And that was the end of it. No pity, no regret, just quiet satisfaction that justice had been served. It wasn't his spell, but it carried his approval. That made it his judgment. And in Harry's eyes, betrayal wasn't something you forgave. It was something you punished. A Gryffindor might have argued for mercy. A Hufflepuff might have looked for understanding. But Harry? Harry stood by the curse. He treated Marietta like an enemy within. And that cold finality, cutting someone out with no hesitation, is something any Slytherin would understand. Number 10. Took advantage of his chosen one fame. By 6th year, Harry wasn't just a student. He was the chosen one. The title echoed in the corridors, whispered behind bookshelves, printed in the Daily Prophet. At first, he hated it, but soon he learned to use it. When Minister Scrimgeour pulled him aside, asking Harry to smile for the public, Harry refused, but he understood the game. "I am Dumbledore's man through and through," he said. A line for the history books, and a political weapon aimed straight at the Ministry's pride. In Slughorn's classroom, Harry used the name like a key. "I'm the chosen one," he said jokingly to Hermione, but he wasn't wrong. The label opened doors. It got him Slughorn's attention, invitations, private lessons, rare memories. Slughorn wanted to be close to power, and Harry gave him just enough to keep him leaning in. When it came time to extract the Horcrux memory, Harry didn't just ask, he performed. He used charm, grief, and the full weight of his fame to break through Slughorn's guilt, Slytherin-worthy persuasion. And with Draco, Harry didn't hide in shadows. He threw suspicion in public. "I know what you're up to," he told him in front of others, knowing that his words carried weight. Students watched, teachers listened. His status wasn't just a burden anymore, it was a tool. He learned how to shift attention, sway belief, and make whispers grow into truth. He didn't lie, he didn't need to. The world believed in the boy who lived, and Harry finally understood how to use that belief to win. Number 11 showed no mercy to Peter Pettigrew. Pettigrew was on his knees, trembling. His voice cracked as he begged for mercy, hands raised in surrender. But Harry didn't flinch. He stood between Sirius and Remus, staring at the man who had betrayed his parents. "Then you should have died!" Harry shouted. "Died rather than betray them." Those weren't the words of a boy still learning right from wrong. They were the words of someone who had already chosen where justice ends and mercy stops. For a moment, even Sirius and Lupin hesitated. They wanted to kill Peter, but Harry stopped them, not out of pity, but principle. He didn't want blood, he wanted punishment. "I don't reckon my dad would have wanted his best friends to become murderers," he said. But he didn't defend Peter. He looked at him with cold finality and demanded that he be handed to the Dementors. He made it clear Peter deserved Azkaban. No forgiveness, no sympathy, only consequences. It wasn't a decision born from compassion. It was law, drawn in the sand with unshaking hands. At 13, Harry already saw the world through a sharper lens than most. Pettigrew's grovelling didn't touch him. His tears meant nothing. In that moment, Harry wasn't a child, or even a Gryffindor. He was a judge, stern, focused, unforgiving. Just like a Slytherin who knew the price of betrayal. Number 12. Invaded Snape's memories without regret. The memory hit him like a wave. A younger Snape, cornered by James Potter. Humiliated in front of Lily Evans. A flash of anger, the word mudblood. Harry wasn't supposed to see it. But when Snape turned his back during an occlumency lesson, Harry seized the chance. He plunged into the pensive and stole what wasn't his. "This is your father's idea of fun," Snape had once said with venom. Now Harry saw the truth and didn't flinch. He didn't apologize, not really, not for the violation, not for the pain. "I didn't mean to," he began, but Snape cut him off. "Get out!" The door slammed, and Harry was left with the taste of guilt he didn't quite swallow, because beneath the shame was a spark of justification. He believed he needed to know, to understand Snape's hatred, to get one step ahead. That belief, that end justifies the means thinking, is pure Slytherin logic, cold, focused, strategic. It wasn't the last time Harry would break a boundary for information, but this was the first time it felt personal. He didn't regret what he saw, he regretted getting caught. A Gryffindor might have felt shame. A Hufflepuff would have apologized, but Harry in that moment didn't do either. He used knowledge as a weapon, and when the door closed behind him, he walked away with more than a secret. He walked away with power. Number 13 defeated Voldemort with psychological warfare. In the final moments of the Battle of Hogwarts, Harry didn't raise his wand first. He raised his voice. Standing in the Great Hall, surrounded by the living and the dead, he faced Tom Riddle not as a frightened boy, but as an equal. "You're the one who's weak. You'll never know love or friendship," he said, his voice steady. Voldemort sneered, but something in his eyes flickered. Doubt. Harry had found the crack in the armor, and he pressed harder. He spoke of Snape, of how Voldemort had murdered his most loyal follower, believing him the master of the Elder Wand. "The wand's allegiance lies with me," Harry said. He wasn't just taunting, he was unraveling Voldemort's sense of control. Each sentence was deliberate, each truth a carefully placed dagger. Tom Riddle had built his power on fear and secrecy. Harry shattered it with knowledge. He wasn't dueling, he was dismantling a man's belief in his own legend. He reminded Voldemort of Lily, not with sentiment, but with strategy. He spoke of her sacrifice, of the protection that had saved him, of the love Voldemort had never understood and always underestimated. "Try for some remorse, Riddle," Harry said quietly in front of everyone. It wasn't a plea, it was a trap. An open door to redemption, fully knowing Voldemort would never walk through it. Slytherins know how to weaponize mercy. Harry did exactly that. By the time Voldemort finally cast the killing curse, he had already lost. The Elder Wand turned in Harry's hand like a whisper of fate. The spell rebounded. Tom Riddle fell, not in a blaze of fury, but in silence. No scream. No glory, just death. Harry had fought without striking. He had won the war with a Slytherin's mind, calm, calculating, and devastatingly precise. Number 14 hid dreams from Dumbledore. Harry was warned. Dumbledore told him, "You must learn to close your mind." But Harry didn't listen. Night after night, the dreams grew worse. He saw through Voldemort's eyes, snakes slithering, doors opening, people falling. Dumbledore had asked him to report any vision immediately, yet Harry kept silent. Even when he saw Arthur Weasley attacked in the Department of Mysteries, he hesitated. He stood in the snow outside Grimmauld Place, shaking, terrified, and still he waited before saying a word. It wasn't just fear, it was pride, it was instinct. Harry had begun to suspect that Dumbledore was withholding too much. Their once close bond now felt distant. Dumbledore avoided eye contact, gave him vague answers, and Harry felt isolated. A true Gryffindor might have demanded the truth, but Harry chose the Slytherin way, secrecy and independence. He acted on his own, deciding which information to share, and when, he told Hermione, "He's not telling me everything." That was enough for him to keep Dumbledore out. This behavior mirrored the Slytherin mindset. Self-reliance, distrust, the belief that knowledge was power. Tom Riddle had once done the same. He had wandered through Hogwarts hiding secrets, unwilling to let anyone see his thoughts. Now Harry followed that path, unknowingly echoing the boy who would become Voldemort. In Order of the Phoenix, when Dumbledore finally confronts Harry and tells him, "I cared about you too much," Harry's response is rage. He throws things, yells, but deep down he knows the silence had cost them both. What's most chilling is how natural the lie became. Harry continued to keep secrets not only from Dumbledore, but from Ron and Hermione too. He believed only he could understand the darkness. Only he could carry it. That idea, the chosen one burdened by silent knowledge, didn't come from Gryffindor's handbook. It came from somewhere colder, more cunning, somewhere beneath the dungeons where ambition and secrecy were born. Number 15 used Polyjuice Potion to infiltrate Slytherin House. Of all the things Harry Potter did during his years at Hogwarts, few moments were as calculated and coldly executed as the operation he carried out in his second year, deep beneath the school's cheerful surface. It was not a Gryffindor's charge into danger, nor a Ravenclaw's pursuit of knowledge, nor a Hufflepuff's loyalty. What Harry did was, by every measure, a Slytherin move, secretive, strategic, manipulative. It happened during the height of panic surrounding the attacks on Muggle-born students. The school was in turmoil. Whispers of the legendary Chamber of Secrets had turned into full-blown hysteria. And Harry, desperate for answers, stepped beyond bravery. He chose subterfuge. Harry's suspicion had taken root early. He believed Draco Malfoy might be the heir of Salazar Slytherin. Malfoy, pure blood and proud, wore his disdain for Muggle-borns like a badge. It fit the theory too well, and Gryffindors don't sit idly when danger looms. But what Harry did next wasn't the impulsive reaction of a brave heart. It was a slow-brewing scheme that required patience, resources, secrecy, and deception. It began with the brewing of Polyjuice Potion, one of the most complicated and restricted potions known in the magical world. According to Moste Potente potions, it required lacewing flies, stewed for 21 days, fluxweed picked at the full moon, leeches, powdered bicorn horn, and shredded boomslang skin, the last two of which resided in the off-limits potion stores, guarded by Professor Snape. Harry didn't hesitate. He, Ron, and Hermione plotted the theft with quiet precision. It was Hermione who executed the actual theft during a class, but Harry was fully complicit. He knew it was theft. He knew they would be expelled if caught. But he also knew the value of information. What is remarkable is not just that he agreed to it, but that he embraced it. This wasn't a reckless charge, it was careful infiltration. The ingredients were stolen. The potion began to brew in Moaning Myrtle's bathroom itself. An isolated, creepy location few dared to visit, and over a month passed while they waited. They were patient, they were secretive, they were, in every way, operating like Slytherins. By Christmas, the potion was ready. Harry had obtained 2 hairs from Goyle's robes. Ron had gotten crabs. Hermione's attempt to use Millicent Bulstrode's hair backfired, as it turned out to be from a cat. But Harry went through with it. He drank the vile-tasting potion and transformed into Gregory Goyle. His own body twisted, his hands swelled, his voice dropped. And he did all this not for some noble charge in battle, but to infiltrate the Slytherin common room and pull secrets from a classmate's mouth. Not just any classmate, Draco Malfoy, the boy he loathed and distrusted. What makes this moment especially Slytherin is that it required cold logic. Harry didn't let his personal emotions cloud the mission. He knew he might not find the answer he was looking for, but the possibility was enough. Risk was calculated, reward weighed, deception embraced. As he and Ron, disguised as Crabbe and Goyle, entered the dungeons and gave the password "Pure Blood," they stepped fully into enemy territory. It was hostile, unfamiliar, dangerous. Yet Harry moved with calm purpose. Inside, he kept his cover. He mimicked Goyle's lumbering behavior, pretended to be dumb and disinterested. When Draco spoke of the attacks and of his own suspicions, Harry listened carefully, steering the conversation subtly. He didn't charge at the truth. He drew it out, manipulated the talk to get what he needed. He opened his mouth, and instead of his own voice, a deep, growling one emerged, the book tells us. He was completely in character, entirely undercover. The entire scene reads like a spy novel, not a tale of magical heroics. Draco, of course, revealed that he was not the heir. He was frustrated, jealous of the attention the attacker was getting, but he didn't have the answers Harry wanted. That didn't make the mission a failure, quite the opposite. It eliminated a major suspect. More importantly, it showed how far Harry was willing to go, not just to protect others, but to uncover the truth. He didn't break down doors. He infiltrated. That's what Slytherins do. They don't shout their moves. They whisper them in the dark. This wasn't the last time Harry used deception for strategic gain, but it was the first time he embraced it fully. He put aside his Gryffindor impulses and acted with the kind of cold planning that would make even Severus Snape take notice. In fact, it was Snape who nearly caught them during the theft. The risk was enormous, and Harry knew it, but he also knew something else, that playing fair wouldn't work. That sometimes, to defeat darkness, you have to understand its language. There's a reason the Sorting Hat almost placed Harry in Slytherin. It saw the qualities within him: resourcefulness, determination, a certain disregard for rules when a higher goal called. Harry never fully admitted it, but in this mission he proved it. He showed he could think like a Slytherin, plan like one, act like one, and most chillingly, he did it without hesitation. He accepted the moral greyness of the act. He didn't stop to wrestle with it. He knew it was necessary. There's something deeply unsettling about the Polyjuice operation. It wasn't a moment of triumph. It was a descent into darkness. Hermione's transformation went horribly wrong, and she ended up in the hospital wing. Harry and Ron had to flee from the common room before their potion wore off. It wasn't glorious. It was dirty, dangerous, and secret. But that's what made it effective. It worked. And Harry never apologized for it. Number 16 kept secrets even from close friends. Harry Potter never fancied himself a Slytherin. From the moment the Sorting Hat even whispered the word, he recoiled. "Not Slytherin! Not Slytherin!" he muttered with urgency. Yet the more his story unfolded, the more traces of the Serpent House began to coil beneath the surface of the boy who lived. There was one trait in particular, sharpened not by ambition or cunning alone, but by the lonely resolve to withhold. Harry kept secrets, not just from strangers, not merely from his enemies, but from the very people who loved him most. He bore his knowledge like a shield, guarding it with fierce independence. In these moments, decisive, shadowed, and cold, Harry Potter resembled not a noble Gryffindor, but a true Slytherin. When Harry first saw the prophecy that tied his fate to Voldemort, it changed everything. Dumbledore, in one of his most vulnerable confessions, explained why the full prophecy had been hidden from him for so long. But what surprised everyone wasn't that Dumbledore had kept secrets. It was that Harry, once in possession of the truth, did exactly the same. He didn't share the prophecy with Ron or Hermione, not fully, not at first. He bore the weight alone. "Neither can live while the other survives," he repeated to himself, swallowing the chill those words carried. It was a truth he wrapped around himself like armor, not trusting even his closest allies to carry it with him. Gryffindors fight together. Slytherins calculate their risks. In The Half-Blood Prince, Harry discovered the old potions textbook marked with the scrawled handwriting of someone who called himself the Half-Blood Prince. The spells inside were powerful, dangerous, sectum sempra, most of all. He didn't tell Hermione, not until it was far too late. Not when he first used Levicorpus, not when he found more effective brewing instructions, and not when the book began to whisper secrets far too useful to ignore. He locked it away, claimed it was nothing special, and when Hermione grew suspicious, he deflected. This secrecy was not mere forgetfulness, it was intentional. He feared judgment, yes, but he also feared the loss of control. Slytherins understand the value of knowledge hidden. The moment he realized the power of the book, he stopped seeing it as a shared discovery and began treating it as a private weapon. When Dumbledore died and left behind only riddles in the form of objects, Harry didn't explain the contents of the will to anyone, not really. He received the first golden snitch he ever caught, but didn't mention its inscription to Hermione and Ron until months later. "I open at the close," the words whispered to him again and again, a mystery he wrestled with in silence. This, too, was typical of Slytherin cunning, not just in keeping secrets, but in hoarding them, believing their worth diminished once shared. Dumbledore had left breadcrumbs, but Harry refused to scatter them among his friends. He chose solitude. He chose silence. The journey to destroy Voldemort's Horcruxes was marked not only by danger, but by Harry's persistent unwillingness to share everything. When he began to sense the connection between the Horcruxes and objects of historical value, like Hufflepuff's cup or Ravenclaw's diadem, he withheld these theories until he was sure. Even then, he often revealed them as final conclusions, not as hypotheses open to discussion. In the Slytherin common room, painted in green and silver and steeped in generations of suspicion, this behavior would have been natural. In Gryffindor Tower, it was not. Yet Harry wasn't acting like a Gryffindor then. One of the clearest examples came when Harry realized he had become an unintended Horcrux. This realization didn't arrive in a single blinding moment. It built slowly, painfully, with the knowledge that he could feel Voldemort's thoughts more clearly than ever. He began to sense the truth, especially after witnessing Snape's memories, but he didn't speak of it. He didn't tell Ron, he didn't tell Hermione, he simply walked into the Forbidden Forest alone. This was not bravery alone, it was secretive sacrifice. There was pride in it, and manipulation. He left them out, not just to protect them, but to control the ending himself. That is a Slytherin trait, controlling the narrative, even in death. Even in earlier years, when he first saw the Mirror of Erist, Harry never spoke of what he saw to anyone, not to Hermione, not to Dumbledore until prompted, and certainly not to Ron. The image of his parents, alive and warm, was his secret sorrow, his private wish. It was not Gryffindor camaraderie that guided him. It was internal solitude, protective and cold. He lingered at the mirror alone for nights, chasing a vision he couldn't explain. Gryffindors often wear their hearts on their robes. Harry did not. In that secrecy, he resembled the sons of Salazar. His relationship with Draco Malfoy in 6th year unveiled another layer of his Slytherin leanings. When he grew obsessed with Malfoy's behavior, disappearing acts, the vanishing cabinet, secretive whispers in corridors, Harry conducted his own investigation, refusing to confide in even Hermione and Ron. His evidence was fragmented, his case speculative, and his friends doubted him. But he did not invite them into the mystery. He worked alone, stalking Malfoy through the Marauder's map, tailing him in corridors, and ambushing him in the bathroom where Sectum Sempra left Draco bleeding. Harry had crossed into obsession, into secrecy, into moral ambiguity. These are dangerous paths well trodden in Slytherin lore. When it came to Snape, especially after discovering his mother's name in the margins of the Half-Blood Prince's book, Harry again chose silence. The connection between Lily and Snape began to stir something inside him, something he didn't share. He was angry, confused, but not open. This guardedness was not just emotional immaturity, it was a strategic retreat from vulnerability. He hid behind anger, behind sarcasm's twin, avoidance. And in those moments, he kept a part of himself locked away, even from Ron and Hermione. There was something deeply Slytherin in that. Number 17 executed a secret operation inside Hogwarts. Under the flickering torches of Hogwarts' endless corridors in the shadow of war, Harry Potter did something that few ever expected. As the final battle approached, he slipped into a role that bore the hallmarks of Salazar Slytherin himself, not the villain that many assumed lived in the dungeon's legacy, but the strategist, the manipulator, the master of cunning. That night, Harry was no longer just the brave Gryffindor. He was the architect of deception, the conductor of a distraction so effective that even Professor McGonagall, his closest adult ally, was left in the dark. He acted alone, but not recklessly. This was no charge into danger with a wand blazing. This was calculated, cold, strategic, Slytherin. It all began with a decision not to share the full truth. When Harry returned to Hogwarts in the Deathly Hallows, he was hunting Horcruxes, the shattered pieces of Voldemort's soul. He knew with mounting clarity that one of them was hidden within the Room of Requirement, but he also knew that revealing this to the wrong person could compromise the mission. The school was no longer a safe haven. It was filled with eyes and ears, some loyal, some not, and some far too curious. Even friends, he realized, could be liabilities if they knew too much. And so he told them just enough to move the pieces, but not the whole board. A very Slytherin move. Minerva McGonagall, stern, sharp, and honourable to the end, trusted Harry. When he appeared in the great hall, exhausted and dishevelled, demanding access to the castle, she didn't hesitate. She rallied the defenders, she cast the enchantments, she prepared for war. But Harry didn't confide in her fully. When she asked what he was searching for, he was evasive. "There's something we have to do," he said, his voice low. "Something hidden here in the castle." But he didn't explain more. Not what, not where, and crucially, not why. It was deliberate, controlled, dangerous, and effective. This concealment wasn't born of mistrust. It was born of instinct. Harry understood, perhaps for the first time, the value of secrecy not as a shield, but as a weapon. He needed everyone's focus elsewhere. He needed them to fight, to resist, to create chaos and noise and distraction. While they did that, he would vanish into the folds of the castle. The same castle that once protected him was now a battlefield, and he had to disappear within it, like a ghost in the dark. That too was Slytherin magic, the magic of vanishing. The Room of Requirement was not easy to find, not in its true form. It changed, it shifted, it concealed what it protected. Harry knew this, but he also knew that in times of need, the room revealed itself. He had used it before, as Dumbledore's army trained in secret. Now he returned, but this time with darker purpose. The Horcrux he sought, the lost diadem of Ravenclaw, was somewhere inside. But so were others, Draco Malfoy, Vincent Crabbe, Gregory Goyle, and in that tangle of past and present enemies, Harry moved like a shadow, slipping between flames and curses, outsmarting those who hunted him. What made his strategy brilliant wasn't just that he avoided conflict, it was that he anticipated it. He knew the Carrows and the Death Eaters would fight. He knew the defenders of Hogwarts would stand. He knew Voldemort was watching, always watching, but he also knew that Voldemort could be distracted, and so Harry became the ghost of Slytherin's own making, hidden, controlled, calculated. Ron and Hermione were the only ones who knew the full picture. Even then, Harry kept control of the mission. He dictated the pace, he moved the pieces, he ordered the silence, and in those hours of tension, he never once faltered in his resolve. "We can't tell anyone," he told them. "Too much talking, and he'll know. He always knows." That fear was real. That instinct, honed over years of survival, was sharp. But it was also cunning. Harry had learned to think like Voldemort, not just to fight him. In the final hours before the battle erupted, Hogwarts transformed into a war machine. The suits of armor came alive, enchantments filled the air, magical barriers shimmered across the stone. And Harry moved through it all, not as a hero, but as a saboteur. He passed through secret tunnels, slipped behind enemy lines, and evaded detection. He didn't act like a lion charging into battle. He acted like a serpent, winding unseen through the ruins of a collapsing world. There is one moment, small, easy to miss, when Harry's Slytherin brilliance shines brightest. It's when he reaches the room of requirement and realizes that he is not alone. Malfoy and his allies are already there. They are hunting him, but Harry doesn't panic. He adapts. He doesn't confront them directly. He uses the room itself, its shifting form, its hidden exits. He turns the battlefield into a trap, not for them, but for the Horcrux, the real enemy. And as Crabbe conjures the fiend fire that consumes everything, Harry calculates again. He doesn't fight the fire, he uses it. The chaos becomes cover. The flames destroy the diadem. Mission complete. Objective achieved, all while the world burns. Even in that harrowing moment when the cursed fire turns on its caster and begins to consume the room, Harry doesn't hesitate. He makes split-second decisions. He saves Draco Malfoy. He commands Ron and Hermione. He grabs the broom, navigates the burning inferno, and escapes. The Gryffindor in him was brave, but the Slytherin, oh, the Slytherin, was brilliant. Number 18 lied to Umbridge and led her into a trap. In the darkening halls of Hogwarts, where loyalty was tested and danger seeped into the very stones of the castle, Harry Potter once made a decision that no true Gryffindor should have made, at least not in the eyes of those who believed in honor as a pure, unbending force. It was not a matter of courage, nor a moment of righteous defiance. It was a lie, a deliberate, premeditated falsehood told not in fear, but in strategy. And that lie, whispered under pressure, shaped not just the outcome of a dangerous moment, it revealed a part of Harry that had always been lurking beneath the surface. Not the lion, but the serpent. Not the noble knight, but the cunning tactician. When Dolores Umbridge, the self-appointed Inquisitor of Hogwarts, cornered Harry in her sinister, pink-walled office, demanding the location of a mysterious weapon, she had no idea that she was playing into the hands of a boy who had learned to lie with purpose. Umbridge believed she had broken Harry, that the Cruciatus curse she nearly cast would be enough to loosen his tongue. But Harry's mind was already working faster than her wand. He didn't just lie to protect a secret, he crafted a story, baited a trap, and led his enemy straight into it. "There's a weapon," Harry said, invoking something she feared more than Dumbledore's rebellion, the possibility of a secret weapon hidden somewhere she could not reach. That idea alone was enough to blind her with greed. And it worked. She swallowed the lie whole and followed him into the forbidden forest, clinging to her own sense of power, unaware that she was the one being hunted. Harry knew what he was doing. He didn't hesitate. He didn't weigh the morality of it. He used her weakness against her, manipulated her desire for control, and delivered her to the centaurs. The brilliance of this act lies not in the act itself, but in Harry's understanding of human behavior. He knew Umbridge would believe him if he told her what she wanted to hear. He understood her lust for domination, her hunger to possess Dumbledore's secrets. That wasn't bravery, that was insight, that was calculation, that was Slytherin. This wasn't the spontaneous defiance of a Gryffindor, it was the cold precision of someone who knew exactly how to play the game. He didn't rush into the forest blindly. He orchestrated a performance and made himself the bait. This wasn't the first time Harry used deception as a weapon. Back in the first book, Philosopher's Stone, he convinced Neville Longbottom to stand down so he, Ron, and Hermione could go after the stone. He knew Neville wouldn't listen to reason, so Hermione cast a full body-bind curse on him, but it was Harry who allowed the lie to happen, the lie that they were doing what was best for everyone. "You're wrong," Neville had said. "I'm not letting you do this." But Harry didn't correct him. He didn't try to argue. He let the lie live. Later, in Order of the Phoenix, he would once again lie, not just to enemies, but to friends. He kept the truth of his dreams from Ron and Hermione for weeks, downplaying the terrifying visions of Voldemort inside his head. He knew they would worry. He knew they would press him to act in ways he couldn't explain. So he chose silence, cloaking himself in false calm. It wasn't noble. It was protective. It was manipulative. He shaped the truth to fit the moment, even if it meant deceiving those closest to him. The lie told to Umbridge, though, was his most explicit embrace of Slytherin tactics. It was deception, weaponized. It was manipulation dressed as compliance. And in the end, it was devastatingly effective. When the centaurs surrounded her, when she cried out for help, it was too late. Harry had already stepped back, watching his plan unfold with ruthless clarity. Even Hermione, who had gone along with the charade, was visibly shaken by the results. But Harry never flinched. He knew what had to be done, and he did it. What makes this act so distinctly Slytherin is not just the lie itself, but the motive behind it. He didn't lie for attention, nor out of fear. He lied to win. He used deception not as a shield, but as a sword. This is the hallmark of Salazar's house. Not evil, but effectiveness. Not chaos, but control. "You could be great, you know," the Sorting Hat had told Harry. "It's all here in your head, and Slytherin will help you on the way to greatness." Perhaps the Hat saw this capacity for manipulation even then, buried beneath the boy's desire for belonging. In Half-Blood Prince, Harry again used deception, this time against Draco Malfoy. He knew Draco was hiding something, plotting something, and instead of confronting him directly, Harry stalked him. He used the Marauder's map, he lied to professors, he slipped into rooms unseen and eavesdropped. This wasn't Gryffindor heroism, it was espionage, cold, strategic, and entirely unromantic. He played the long game, even breaking into the Room of Requirement. And when he finally cursed Draco in the bathroom, the spell he used, Sectum Sempra, was one he had found in a handwritten book, kept secret even from Dumbledore. Harry lied about the spell too. After seeing the horrifying effects of it, he told Snape he didn't know what it would do. But he had read the margin note. For enemies. He had known enough. He concealed the truth, not only to protect himself, but because admitting the truth would mean surrendering the one advantage he had, his Slytherin edge. The Half-Blood Prince's book wasn't just a tool, it was a glimpse into another world, a darker world, and Harry stepped into it willingly. Even in Deathly Hallows, Harry's deception reached new heights. He used the Polyjuice potion repeatedly, impersonating ministry officials. He snuck through Gringotts under disguise, stealing from Bellatrix Lestrange's vault with Griphook at his side. He lied to Griphook too, promising the sword of Gryffindor while never intending to give it up. It was a betrayal, justified by the need to defeat Voldemort. But it was still a betrayal. No matter how far he had fallen, Harry thought of Dumbledore once, he had done it for the greater good. And so did Harry. The lie became a means of victory. Lying for Harry became an evolving art. It wasn't impulsive, it was adapted to the stakes. Each deception revealed not a change in character, but a consistency of ambition. He wanted to win, he wanted to survive, he wanted to protect. And if that meant bending the truth, breaking it, reshaping it to fit the narrative, then so be it. This wasn't a flaw, it was a strategy. And in that strategy lived a part of Slytherin most Gryffindors would never admit to. One cannot forget the moment in Chamber of Secrets when Harry hears the Parseltongue in the walls and chooses not to tell anyone. It wasn't out of shame, it was out of calculation. He knew what the others would think. He knew how they would react. He didn't want to be feared, so he lied. He buried the truth until it clawed its way into the open. That silence, that omission, was perhaps his first major lie, and it set the stage for all the others. When Sirius Black escaped Azkaban and Harry learned the truth of his godfather's innocence, he again chose secrecy over transparency. He protected Sirius, knowing the Ministry would never listen. He hid messages. He manipulated the fireplace network. He even lied to Professor Lupin, all to keep the man he loved out of reach of the law. "He's not a murderer," Harry said once, but he didn't explain how he knew. He understood the value of withholding information. Gryffindor might seek justice. Slytherin seeks advantage. And what of the Resurrection Stone? When Harry walks into the Forbidden Forest clutching the stone, flanked by the shadows of the dead, he does not tell Ron or Hermione what he is about to do. He says goodbye without words, disappears into the woods, and lies by omission once again. He does not give them a chance to stop him. He chooses the path, controls the moment, and shapes the narrative. Even in death, he chooses manipulation over clarity. There's a moment in Goblet of Fire when Harry is alone with the golden egg, trying to solve its secret. He hides his efforts from everyone, isolates himself, even lies to Cedric by omission. Later, when Cedric is murdered, Harry is the only one who knows the full truth of what happened in the graveyard. And when the Ministry refuses to believe him, he withholds key details. Not because he is afraid, but because he knows that not every truth can be shared at once. Sometimes the lie buys time. Throughout the series, Harry operates under the belief that intent matters more than method. If the lie serves the light, then it is not dark. If the deception defeats the enemy, then it is just. This is not Gryffindor logic, it is Slytherin pragmatism. Gryffindors act, Slytherin's plan. Gryffindors rebel, Slytherins conspire. Harry did both. And that duality, the lion and the snake, was what made him truly dangerous. What is perhaps most striking is that Harry never apologizes for his lies. He does not reflect on them with guilt. He reflects on them with understanding. He grows sharper, wiser, more deliberate. And in doing so, he proves that Slytherin is not evil. It is necessary. Salazar Slytherin believed in self-preservation and cunning not as flaws but as virtues. In many ways, Harry was the perfect realization of that vision. Courage, shaped by strategy. Power, tempered by secrecy. Even Voldemort, the purest form of ambition, could not comprehend the depth of Harry's deception. He underestimated the boy who lived because he saw only the Gryffindor crest. He didn't see the hidden serpent beneath the scar. He didn't see the cunning, the lies, the misdirection. And in that blindness he sealed his fate. When the final battle ended and Harry stood before a broken wand victorious, the world saw a hero. But the truth is more complex. He was a Gryffindor, yes, but he was also something more, something darker, something strategic. The boy who lied and won. Number 19. Investigated Snape behind his back. Harry Potter, so often heralded as the paragon of Gryffindor bravery, made a choice in his first year that aligns much more closely with the cunning and distrustful nature of a Slytherin. He defied not only school rules but also the wisdom of the greatest wizard of the age, Albus Dumbledore. When Harry began to suspect Professor Severus Snape of plotting evil, he did not stop to question whether his judgment, as a mere 11-year-old, could be flawed. He didn't heed Dumbledore's clear assurances that Snape could be trusted. Instead, Harry began a methodical, secretive investigation behind his professor's back. That one decision, one of many in his life, shows a side of Harry that few acknowledge. It was not a naive mistake. It was the instinct of a true Slytherin. From the moment Harry set foot in Hogwarts, his instincts kicked in, warning him about Snape. During the sorting hat ceremony, the hat had already picked up on something unusual. You could be great, you know, it's all here in your head, and Slytherin will help you on the way to greatness, no doubt about that. But Harry, influenced by the negative perceptions he'd heard of Slytherin on the train from Ron, begged not to be placed in that house. The hat relented. Still, that inner drive, that ambition to get to the truth regardless of the cost, never left him. When others would have accepted Dumbledore's judgment, Harry plotted, analysed, watched, and questioned. That was not youthful recklessness, it was strategy. The target of Harry's suspicion was not some shady classmate or a fellow 11-year-old. It was Professor Severus Snape, a man with immense power, decades of magical experience, and a fearsome presence. Most first years would have avoided his notice at all costs. But Harry leaned into the discomfort. He watched Snape closely, took note of his interactions with others, especially with Professor Quirrell, and interpreted every gesture, every word, through the lens of suspicion. This kind of calculated observation is more in line with Slytherin's tradition of espionage and manipulation than with Gryffindor's usual preference for direct confrontation. What's striking is that Harry never had any evidence of wrongdoing at the start. His conviction grew from a single moment in the Great Hall when Snape appeared to glare at him with hatred. That first spark ignited a fire of obsession. When Harry's broomstick was cursed during a Quidditch match, his suspicions only intensified. He didn't simply believe that Snape might be the culprit. He investigated, closely observing who was speaking what incantation, noting how Snape wasn't blinking, and had his eyes locked on Harry. He didn't go to a professor with his theory. He kept it to himself, and only shared it with Ron and Hermione, his trusted allies in his private mission. That is how Slytherins operate. They move in shadows, trust a very tight circle, and build their theories in secret. Slytherin House values resourcefulness. Harry exhibited this quality in abundance. He and his friends tracked down books, researched spells, and devised plans to uncover what was really happening at Hogwarts. When most students would be overwhelmed by the mystery of the Philosopher's Stone, Harry turned the situation into a personal crusade. The moment he overheard Hagrid mention Nicholas Flamel's name by accident, he latched onto it with the focus of a hunter. This was more than simple curiosity. It was tactical pursuit, an unrelenting search for the truth, even when the adults insisted there was nothing to find. At the core of his suspicions was a firm belief that his instincts mattered more than authority. Dumbledore, revered and beloved, had vouched for Snape. Harry knew this. In fact, Hermione reminded him constantly that if Dumbledore trusted Snape, they should too. But Harry didn't yield. He challenged that trust, not publicly, but through quiet defiance. That shows ambition, not just to be right, but to assert one's own judgment above all else. That is the hallmark of Slytherin House, belief in the power of the self, in one's own mind and will, even against the strongest authorities. When Harry followed Snape into the Forbidden Forest late at night, he demonstrated his willingness to break rules not for fun or thrill, but to gather intelligence. That moment, hiding in the darkness, straining to hear every word of Snape's conversation with Quirrell, could have come straight out of a Slytherin playbook. It was an act of stealth, not bravery. A Gryffindor might have marched up and demanded answers. Harry remained in the shadows, collected information, and retreated to share his findings with only those he deemed worthy. It was calculated. It was clever. It was dangerous. The way Harry began to construct a narrative of guilt around Snape also speaks to a Slytherin trait, strategic manipulation of available facts. Every time Snape deducted points or was cruel to him, Harry used it as confirmation of his theory. When he saw Snape limping, he concluded that it was because of the three-headed dog. He never questioned whether these signs could mean something else. He built a case from selected observations, reinforcing his bias until it felt like truth. That's not a Gryffindor impulse. It's the mindset of someone who understands how to shape reality to fit a goal, a subtle form of manipulation that any Slytherin would recognize. Even when evidence emerged that Quirrell might not be as innocent as he seemed, Harry refused to let go of his theory about Snape. He adapted it, claiming Snape was coercing Quirrell. This refusal to yield to obvious answers, this insistence on preserving his own story, showed both obsession and ambition, qualities that define Slytherins. He would not let another version of events override the one he'd spent months building. It was no longer just about protecting the stone, it became personal. He had to be right. After the events with the Mirror of Erised, Dumbledore again tried to steer Harry away from suspicion. The headmaster told him that fear of a name increases fear of the thing itself, and emphasized the importance of love and truth. But Harry couldn't unsee what he thought he'd seen. He continued to seek secret knowledge. Even in his second year, he suspected the wrong person again, Draco Malfoy this time, but with the same methodical, secretive energy. It wasn't foolish repetition, it was pattern recognition, a skill prized in Slytherin House. He learned to dig beneath the surface, to suspect pleasant faces, to go beyond what was obvious. What further distances Harry from typical Gryffindor behavior is how much he risked for these private investigations. He endangered his standing at school, his friendships, and even his physical safety to get to the truth. He did not do it with the flash of a Gryffindor charging into battle. He did it like a spy, moving quietly, keeping secrets, and weaving together clues with the obsessive precision of someone who thrives on control. Slytherins understand the value of control. Even in the final confrontation with Quirrell, Harry tried to provoke him into revealing more. He didn't just attack blindly, he asked questions, he listened, he tried to outsmart him, to manipulate the truth out of him. When Quirrell revealed that Snape had actually been protecting him, Harry was stunned, not just by the betrayal of his theory, but because it meant he had been wrong. For someone with Gryffindor sensibilities, that might have been crushing. But Harry didn't spiral. He absorbed the lesson. He recalibrated his understanding of Hogwarts politics. He learned that loyalty can be hidden and that truth can wear a mask. He was becoming more cunning with each passing day. By third year, his investigations into Sirius Black again followed this Slytherin-like pattern. He kept secrets from teachers. He snuck into restricted areas. He followed trails that others missed. While Gryffindors often act from impulse, Harry's actions were increasingly those of a planner. He sought the Marauder's map not just to sneak into Hogsmeade for fun, but to keep tabs on people. He learned to move through the school like a shadow. That map became a tool of espionage, a way to watch without being seen. Slytherins respect tools that offer power through information. His suspicion of Snape continued to evolve. By the sixth book, when Snape makes the unbreakable vow with Narcissa Malfoy, Harry is once again the only one who trusts his instincts above all. He tells Dumbledore, he tells McGonagall, but when they dismiss him, he doesn't stop. He recruits Ron and Hermione to help him monitor Malfoy. He orchestrates surveillance, even going so far as to use the invisibility cloak to stalk and spy. It's not rebellion, it's not mischief, it's strategy, it's surveillance, it's Slytherin. When Dumbledore died, Harry's immediate reaction wasn't just grief, it was clarity. Snape was the enemy. No amount of contrary evidence could shake that belief. It consumed him. But again, it was not baseless emotion. It was the result of years of quiet observations, catalogued grievances, and a consistent distrust in the obvious narrative. Harry always hunted the truth behind the mask. In the final book, He discovers Snape's true loyalty only after death, a truth so well hidden that only someone with deep cunning could have buried it so completely. Yet in this revelation, Harry does not fall apart. He honors Snape's memory. He names his son after him, and most importantly, he understands the value of secrets. He learns that the most powerful acts are often unseen. The final, silent respect Harry gives to Snape, burying the hatred, acknowledging the sacrifice, and keeping parts of the truth private, demonstrates just how far he's come. Not as a Gryffindor, but as someone who could have worn green and silver with ease. Harry Potter was never just brave. He was determined, cunning, strategic, and loyal to his own intuition. When he doubted Snape, it was not the act of a naive boy, it was the move of a tactician. The castle was his chessboard, and everyone in it a piece to be studied. That's not how Gryffindors usually play the game, but for a Slytherin, that's just another day at Hogwarts. Number 20 broke into the Ministry using stealth and disguise. Of all the many moments that revealed the complexity of Harry Potter's character, none was more telling than his decision to infiltrate the Ministry of Magic during the Horcrux hunt. It was an operation that required deception, patience, planning, and above all, a willingness to bend the rules so severely they nearly snapped. The mission disguising themselves using stolen identities, sneaking into the heart of the government, all of it screamed cunning, resourcefulness, and calculated ambition. These were not traits commonly attributed to the House of Gryffindor, where Harry was proudly sorted. Yet in this moment, Harry Potter, the Chosen One, behaved not just with bravery, but with something deeper, darker, more strategic. He acted like a Slytherin. The operation began with meticulous reconnaissance. After discovering that one of Voldemort's Horcruxes, Salazar Slytherin's locket, was hidden within the Ministry, the trio knew that mere courage would not be enough. The Ministry, now a fascist institution under the control of the Death Eaters, was more dangerous than ever. Breaking in meant risking everything, not just for themselves, but for the resistance movement they symbolized. Harry did not hesitate. He agreed without protest, knowing full well the peril involved. That readiness to step into enemy territory, disguised and armed with half information, wasn't the kind of reckless boldness that Gryffindor typically prized. It was measured, it was cold, it was necessary. In the planning stages, Harry showed an uncharacteristic sense of control and clarity. He wasn't storming in with wand blazing, he was studying routines, observing movements, and understanding patterns. Along with Hermione, he helped devise the plan to polyjuice themselves into employees of the Ministry, Albert Runcorn, Mafalda Hopkirk, and Reginald Catamol. The idea wasn't just risky, it was audacious. It required subtlety and improvisation, traits rarely associated with Gryffindor's impetuous spirit. Harry took the identity of Runcorn, a high-ranking Ministry official, and from the moment he transformed, he adapted. He walked like Runcorn, he sneered like Runcorn, he wielded his temporary power like someone born to navigate corridors of influence and fear. What was most revealing, perhaps, was how naturally Harry wore the mask. Inside the Ministry, he didn't break character. When confronted by fellow officials, he spoke with confidence. He even leveraged Runcorn's authority to plant fear and suspicion among his enemies. At one point, he ordered another Ministry worker to leave her post, using intimidation tactics that no Gryffindor would ever relish. Yet Harry did it without flinching. He understood the game, and he played it well. "I'm sorry, but Mr. Runcorn's orders are not to be questioned," he said, voice steady, eyes cold. This was not an act of courage, it was the mastery of performance. When they reached the courtroom level and encountered Dolores Umbridge, the very woman who had tormented them at Hogwarts, Harry did not attack her impulsively. He watched, he listened, he calculated. Only when he saw that she was wearing the locket, their true target, did he act. The patience he showed in that moment spoke volumes. This was not the Harry who would charge into the forbidden forest to save a friend. This was someone who understood the power of waiting for the exact moment to strike. She was wearing it, he told Hermione later, and there was a glint in his eye, not of joy, but of success. The escape itself was chaos, but even there, Harry's instincts were those of a tactician. When Yaxley tried to follow them through the Floo network, Harry altered their destination mid-transport, sacrificing their safety for the integrity of the safe house at Grimmauld Place. It was a quick decision, made with the precision of a seasoned operative. He chose a secondary location, ending up in the woods with Hermione and Ron, bruised and battered but alive. The mission, despite the scars it left, was accomplished. They had the Horcrux. They had learned more about Voldemort's grip on the wizarding world. And Harry had proven something essential about himself. He was more than brave. He was cunning when he needed to be. What separates Gryffindor courage from Slytherin cunning is not simply the willingness to face danger. Gryffindors face it head-on, often without a plan, guided by instinct and heart. Slytherins, on the other hand, calculate the odds, weigh the costs, and manipulate the outcome in their favor. Infiltrating the Ministry required every ounce of the latter. Harry didn't follow a heroic impulse that day. He followed a strategy. He accepted that deception was a tool, not a moral failure. He moved through the Ministry not as a symbol of resistance, but as a ghost wearing someone else's skin, untraceable and deadly. The mission also required secrecy from allies. Harry didn't inform members of the Order of the Phoenix. He didn't seek permission or reinforcement. That autonomy, that desire to control the operation completely, was another Slytherin hallmark. He trusted only Hermione and Ron, not out of friendship, but because he needed operatives who understood the stakes and could adapt. The trio functioned as a covert cell, their loyalty to each other trumping all other affiliations. It wasn't about house loyalty, it wasn't about justice. It was about results. One must also consider the symbolic weight of the Horcrux itself. The locket of Salazar Slytherin was hidden within the belly of the regime. Retrieving it was a reclamation, not of a relic, but of Slytherin's legacy, repurposed by Voldemort and now being taken back by someone he feared most. That Harry, a Gryffindor by name, would risk everything to take Slytherin's heirloom from under the nose of the new regime. It was poetic in its irony. Yet the irony only worked because Harry was able to embody the very traits Salazar himself would have prized. Cunning, the Sorting Hat had said years earlier. Resourcefulness, determination. Well, you could be great, you know, it's all here in your head, and Slytherin will help you on the way to greatness. At the time, Harry rejected that path, but in the Ministry, he fulfilled that prophecy. Greatness didn't come from a sword or a flying broomstick. It came from subterfuge, nerve, and manipulation. He showed Slytherin not what it meant to be evil, but what it meant to be effective. Even Hermione, the moral compass of the group, questioned the lengths to which they were going. But Harry didn't waver. His belief in the mission, in the necessity of stepping into darkness to bring back the light, was absolute. He had learned that war wasn't about honor, it was about advantage. Gryffindor might have given him the heart to fight, but it was Slytherin that gave him the mind to win. This moment also foreshadowed how Harry would later handle the final confrontation with Voldemort. He didn't charge into battle blindly. He gathered information. He misled his enemies. He walked willingly into death, not with Gryffindor boldness, but with Slytherin calculation. The infiltration of the Ministry was the blueprint for the final war. And it worked. In many ways, Harry's time at Hogwarts had always been a quiet dance between houses. He had the courage of a Gryffindor, the loyalty of a Hufflepuff, the intellect of a Ravenclaw, and the strategy of a Slytherin. But never was the Slytherin side more apparent than during that single mission. He wore a stolen face, he manipulated authority, he entered enemy territory and walked out not only unscathed, but victorious. What's even more intriguing is that Harry never looked back with regret. he didn't excuse the mission as a necessary evil. He embraced it as a crucial act of war. That acceptance of moral ambiguity, of fighting darkness with its own tools, is the true mark of someone who understands the game of power. And power, as Slytherins know all too well, is never won cleanly. There's a reason Voldemort feared Harry beyond the prophecy. It wasn't just love that protected him. It wasn't just courage. It was Harry's ability to think like him, to act like him, without becoming him. That is what made Harry dangerous. Not his loyalty to Dumbledore, not his wand skills, but his understanding that sometimes survival means becoming what your enemy doesn't expect, a shadow, a spy, a serpent in the grass. And so in that marble and stone labyrinth of ministry offices, Harry Potter stepped into a role that few Gryffindors could. He became the hunter, not just of Horcruxes, but of secrets. He played the game that Slytherins have mastered for centuries, and he won, not with fire, not with sword, but with silence, patience, and disguise. In that moment, the boy who lived became the boy who infiltrated, and proved that the Hat's hesitation all those years ago was more prophecy than mistake. Number 21. Resented Dumbledore's silence. When Harry Potter stood over Dobby's grave, tracing the words "Here lies Dobby, a free elf," into the stone with trembling fingers, something inside him had already shifted. The warmth that once came from blind trust had grown cold. In the days following Dumbledore's death, as the weight of the Horcrux hunt bore down on his shoulders, Harry began to unravel truths that no one had prepared him for. Not even Albus Dumbledore, the man he had once considered the wisest and most trustworthy figure in the wizarding world. And it was not Voldemort's cruelty or Bellatrix Lestrange's madness that finally forced Harry to re-examine the world. It was silence. Dumbledore's silence. Harry had lived 17 years in pursuit of understanding. He had questioned little in his early years at Hogwarts, relying on Dumbledore's guidance, even when it seemed cryptic or incomplete. But after the headmaster's death atop the astronomy tower, the truths that came to light shattered the pedestal Harry had built for him. He learned about the young Tom Riddle's manipulation of the House of Gaunt, about the Ring of Marvolo, and the hidden knowledge of the Hallows that Dumbledore had deliberately kept from him. This wasn't a minor oversight, it was the architecture of Harry's entire journey, carefully designed and censored. When he held the life and lies of Albus Dumbledore in his hands at the Burrow, he didn't want to believe Rita Skeeter's words. But as the clues piled higher, the photo of young Dumbledore with Gellert Grindelwald, the grave of Ariana, the secrets of the Elder Wand, Harry felt something rare and dangerous creep into his chest: disillusionment. A Slytherin knows the pain of betrayal well. They despise manipulation and crave control over their destiny. And in that moment, Harry was no longer Gryffindor's golden boy. He was a young man questioning power. There had always been a shadow in Dumbledore's gaze, a flicker of withholding. In the Deathly Hallows, Harry realizes that he was not merely Dumbledore's favorite student. He was a piece of the puzzle. "I was supposed to die," Harry whispered to himself by the banks of the Forest of Dean as he realized the extent of the plan. The connection between him and Voldemort wasn't just a spiritual link, it was a deliberate tether. Dumbledore had known, and he had told no one. Wasn't the fear of death that haunted Harry. It was the sense of having been prepared like a lamb for sacrifice. It was a Slytherin instinct that made him recoil. Not from the mission, but from the realization that he had not chosen it. That choice had been withheld. And in Slytherin tradition, power without choice is a mockery. Dumbledore had wielded both. When he spoke to Aberforth in Hogsmeade, the floodgates opened. Ariana, the broken sister, Grindelwald, the shared dream of magical domination. Albus was a man who always thought he knew best, Aberforth said bitterly, and Harry felt his world tilt. Dumbledore, who had preached tolerance and love, had once dreamed of supremacy, and control. That duality, the secret ambition, was something that a Slytherin would understand. And for the first time, Harry began to understand it too. The moment he stepped into the Forbidden Forest, Harry did not do so because he trusted Dumbledore. He did it because he chose to. It was no longer about following orders. He made peace with death on his own terms. This was not the act of a loyal follower. It was the final rejection of manipulation. Even as he clutched the resurrection stone, even as he felt the weight of his parents and mentors walking beside him, he knew they were echoes. He stood alone. In the Deathly Hallows, the quote that defines this shift is simple. He had been doggedly loyal to Dumbledore even after his death, trusting him, following his instructions, going to the lengths of breaking into the Ministry of Magic and risking Ron and Hermione's lives. And now he felt cold fury at Dumbledore's manipulation. Cold fury, not grief, not sadness, but fury. This was not a Gryffindor's response. It was the reaction of someone who refused to be used. Harry's decision to continue the mission wasn't out of obedience. It was born of reclaiming agency. He could have walked away. He could have rejected everything. But he didn't. That, too, is a Slytherin's strength, to seize power from the ruins of betrayal and wield it anew. He understood now what Dumbledore never said, that knowledge is a weapon, and truth, when denied, breeds rebellion. His confrontation with Snape's memories in the Pensieve shattered the last illusions. He saw Dumbledore discussing his death with Snape, planning it like a game of chess. "You alone know whether it will harm your soul," Dumbledore said. That cold calculation was no longer the voice of a mentor. It was the whisper of a strategist. Harry's role was defined, measured, and positioned. He was a pawn made. Noble by sacrifice. The Pensieve showed him everything Dumbledore had refused to share. That Harry was the final Horcrux, that his death was necessary, that Snape, not Dumbledore, had been the true guardian of Harry's soul in the final year. And while Harry understood the necessity, he could not forgive the method. He became, in that moment, a creature of judgment, not of vengeance, but of reckoning. When he entered the Great Hall after the Battle of Hogwarts, his eyes met the portrait of Dumbledore. But he did not bow, he did not smile, he acknowledged it with silence. And that silence spoke of disappointment, of distance, of the kind of cold respect reserved for fallen monarchs. The boy who once ran to Dumbledore's office in search of comfort now walked past it with detachment. In his final encounter with Voldemort, Harry again made a decision that bore the stamp of Slytherin cunning. He chose not to kill out of hatred, but to disarm, to demonstrate power through restraint. He revealed the truth of the Elder Wand to Voldemort not as a confession, but as a warning. "Doesn't work that way," he said. He had learned to speak not as a servant of fate, but as a master of it. After Voldemort's fall, Harry did not seek to restore Dumbledore's image. He didn't defend him when others whispered of his past. He allowed the world to see the cracks. That, too, was a Slytherin choice. Legacy, to a Slytherin, is not protected by illusion. It is forged by truth. Harry honored Dumbledore's victories, but refused to ignore his failures. He accepted him as flawed, powerful, dangerous. In many ways, Harry had always had the instincts of a Slytherin. The Sorting Hat had said as much in The Philosopher's Stone. "You could be great, you know, it's all here in your head, and Slytherin will help you on the way to greatness." But it took years of struggle and loss for that potential to mature. The death of Dumbledore was not just the loss of a mentor, it was the birth of Harry's independence. Slytherins are often misunderstood. Their ambition is not evil, it is clarity. They seek knowledge, control, mastery. Harry, in rejecting blind loyalty, embraced those very values. He learned to question, to seek deeper meaning, to look beyond sentiment. He trusted his instincts over tradition, and in doing so he broke the mold of the chosen one. Even his handling of the Hallows shows his Slytherin side. He kept the invisibility cloak, returned the resurrection stone, and placed the Elder Wand back in Dumbledore's tomb. Not because he wanted to destroy power, but because he understood it. That understanding, that deliberate choice not to wield dominance, was the act of someone who had walked through manipulation and emerged with clarity. When he named his son Albus Severus, it was not simply a gesture of forgiveness, it was an act of balance. He honored both the man who manipulated him and the man who saved him. Gryffindor bravery may have driven him to battle, but it was Slytherin discernment that allowed him to see the contradictions in both names. The greatest irony is that Harry's most Slytherin moment was also his most human. It was not about anger or revenge, it was about reclaiming his life from the hands of others. Dumbledore had shaped him into a hero, but it was Harry who chose to become a man. And that choice, born from disappointment and contemplation, defined him more than any spell or prophecy. When others remember Harry Potter, they speak of courage, but those who look deeper see the boy who learned to distrust, to question, to act on his own terms. That moment after Dumbledore's death, when he no longer blindly followed but began to lead, that was when Harry Potter stepped into the shadows. And like any true Slytherin, he learned that sometimes the greatest power lies not in obedience, but in understanding the game and choosing to play it by your own rules. Number 22. Used dangerous spells in the Battle of Hogwarts. In the smouldering chaos of the Battle of Hogwarts, amid the screams and shattered stone, Harry Potter fought not as the noble Gryffindor so many believed him to be, but as someone who embraced another house's legacy, one whispered about in the corridors, feared by many, and misunderstood by most: Slytherin. When the fate of the wizarding world hinged on every wand movement, every decision made in fire and fury, Harry revealed a side of himself that aligned deeply with the cunning, ambition, and ruthless determination of Salazar Slytherin's descendants. In that final night, cloaked in dust and desperation, Harry moved through the halls of the school with the focus of a predator. He wasn't dueling for points or pride. This was war. He cast spells with rapid precision, often before his opponents could raise their wands. These were not stunning charms meant to gently disarm. They were jinxes and hexes designed to wound, immobilize, or cripple. He fought not like a student, but like a soldier, born in the crucible of pain and loss. In the Hall of Prophecies he had once fought hesitantly. Now he showed no such restraint. He used the Cruciatus Curse. The spell, one of the unforgivables, is not easily performed. It requires more than just knowledge of the incantation. It demands intent, real intent to harm. In the book, Harry casts it on Amicus Carrow after the Death Eater spits in Professor McGonagall's face. It wasn't a moment of rage alone, it was a choice. "You shouldn't have done that," Harry said coldly before casting Crucio. He didn't hesitate. He didn't lecture. He acted with purpose. That was the mark of someone willing to cross lines others wouldn't dare approach. Slytherins are known for their ambition, for their willingness to use any means to achieve their ends. Harry had already defied death multiple times, but in that battle he demonstrated something else, an acceptance of darkness. He no longer clung to the idealistic belief that right would always win without sacrifice. He stepped into the grey and took control. He used whatever magic would bring his enemies down. That mindset mirrored the very core of Slytherin philosophy, not evil, but efficiency. During his duel with Severus Snape in the Astronomy Tower, or rather the chaotic confrontation that would lead to Dumbledore's death, Harry had previously been restrained, even when driven by suspicion and fury. But in the Battle of Hogwarts, that restraint burned away. Facing Death Eaters, giants, and werewolves, he used spells like Expulso, which detonated objects and sent enemies flying through the air. It wasn't a gentle disarming. It was a calculated use of destruction. This wasn't the textbook dueling Harry learned in clubs. This was battlefield instinct. In one of the castle corridors, Harry stunned Augustus Rookwood with such force that the man slammed into a wall and crumpled unconscious. The The spell he used, Stupefy, was more than just a schoolyard trick in Harry's hands. In battle, even benign spells become lethal when amplified by intent and emotion. The Harry who once fumbled through defense against the dark arts now wielded them with ruthless precision, and not once did he falter. When he came upon Travers, another Death Eater, Harry didn't offer warnings or mercy. He cast a spell that ripped the wand from Travers's grip, shattered a window, and forced the man to flee. The spell was not named in the book, but the effect was violent, explosive. In that moment, Harry wasn't interested in capturing his enemy. He was eliminating a threat. That, too, was the Slytherin approach, calculated control of the battlefield, not reckless heroism. He moved like a shadow through the chaos, engaging in skirmishes with the understanding that each second mattered. In the Room of Requirement, transformed into a burning labyrinth of death by fiendfire, Harry didn't try to save Draco Malfoy because it was noble. He did it because even in his darkest moments, he retained control. He would not become the monster the Death Eaters were. But his decision to abandon the hunt for the diadem to rescue Draco after just cursing Crabbe and forcing Goyle unconscious was not a Gryffindor's impulse alone. It was a tactician's decision. Preserve the balance. Keep your enemies alive to maintain the upper hand. It was not only the spells Harry used that echoed Slytherin values, it was how he wielded power. He never asked permission. He took control. He gave orders. He used deception and disguise. He walked into the heart of battle without announcing his presence. He even allowed others to believe he was dead, hiding under the invisibility cloak and choosing the exact moment to re-emerge. That act alone, faking weakness to expose the enemy, was pure Slytherin cunning. When he confronted Voldemort in the Great Hall, his actions were cold and deliberate. He didn't scream, he didn't weep, he challenged Tom Riddle by name, undermining his persona, taunting him in front of his followers. "You're not the master of death, Tom, you never understood it." That wasn't just bravery, that was psychological warfare. Harry attacked not just with spells, but with words that stripped Voldemort of his illusion. He dismantled his enemy's power with truth, and then finished the fight with a single, clean strike. Even his decision to use Expelliarmus in that final moment, rather than a curse, was not simply a return to innocence. He knew Voldemort was using the Elder Wand. He knew that Wand's allegiance had changed. Harry exploited that flaw with surgical precision. He let Voldemort destroy himself. That wasn't mercy, it was strategy. It was the long game. It was the snake coiled, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Earlier, he had dueled Dolohov, whose deadly curse had nearly killed Lupin in the past. Harry didn't hesitate. He aimed spells with the clear goal of incapacitating his foe quickly and permanently. He didn't argue. He didn't negotiate. He acted with lethal intent. The boy who once stuttered through spells in class now battled seasoned killers as an equal. That growth wasn't just the result of time, it was the result of trauma, and of accepting that power meant responsibility, but also danger. When he cast defensive barriers around the wounded, Harry wasn't simply helping, he was establishing territory. He protected those who could no longer fight, acting as both shield and sword. His tactics weren't taught in books. They came from pain, from watching friends die, from understanding that in war, compassion alone doesn't win battles. Slytherins understand that better than anyone. He recognized, perhaps more clearly than anyone else, the importance of knowledge as a weapon. He had studied Voldemort's past, pieced together the puzzle of the Horcruxes, and carried that information into war like a blade honed for years. He never bragged. He never flaunted what he knew, he simply acted on it. That quiet use of hidden knowledge to tilt the odds in his favor was another Slytherin. Hallmark. As the castle burned and the dawn bled across the horizon, Harry stood not as a symbol of Gryffindor courage alone, but as a survivor shaped by every house. His leadership resembled that of a general, not a hero from legend. He moved people into position, coordinated attacks, gave critical orders under pressure. He didn't wait for permission. He assumed command. In war, that's not arrogance, it's necessity. His use of the dark arts, though infrequent, was never clumsy. He didn't flinch when he cast Crucio. He didn't regret using painful hexes. He chose not to use the killing curse, but not because he couldn't. He knew better. He understood that real power wasn't just in destruction, it was in control. He chose spells that gave him the advantage. He used fear, he used silence, he used knowledge. These are the tools of a Slytherin warrior, not a reckless boy. The sword of Gryffindor may have appeared in his hand once, but in that final battle, Harry wielded an invisible weapon, a mind sharpened by loss, a will tempered by suffering, and a moral compass that allowed darkness to walk beside light, not to consume it, but to guide it. That duality is at the heart of what made him dangerous and what made him great. He didn't relish the pain he caused, but he didn't avoid it either. He accepted it as part of the cost. That level of emotional compartmentalization, that willingness to see the war through to its bitter end, is a trait Slytherins respect and understand. Harry didn't fight to prove himself, he fought to win. And in the end, that is what defined his actions, not idealism, but outcome. The whispers in Hogwarts would long debate what made Harry Potter truly exceptional. Some would say it was his courage, others his loyalty. But those who saw him on that final night, who watched him hex, curse, and command, would understand something deeper. That beneath the lion's mane was the mind of a serpent. And in the darkest hour, it wasn't just bravery that saved the world. It was cold, clear-eyed resolve. It was strategy. It was Slytherin. Number 23 exploited Malfoy's vulnerability. In the dim corridors of Hogwarts, Harry Potter moved like a shadow. It was his 6th year, and the war outside the castle walls was mirrored by a quieter, more dangerous war inside. While students whispered of attacks and disappearances, Harry had become obsessed with one thing: Draco Malfoy. It wasn't just suspicion, it was fixation. Harry's instincts told him something was off. Malfoy had changed. The boy who once flaunted his pure blood pride and strutted through the halls now walked alone, shoulders tight, eyes darkened, lips pressed into secrecy. Harry recognized the signs not with the gaze of a hero, but with the sharp calculation of a hunter. When Harry first followed Draco to Borgin and Burke's in Knockturn Alley, it wasn't the Gryffindor in him that acted. Gryffindors faced danger head-on. They didn't skulk behind dusty shelves with eavesdropping devices. But Harry did. Hidden under his invisibility cloak, he watched, he listened, and he remembered. Draco's cryptic conversation with the dark shopkeeper was a puzzle, and Harry was determined to solve it. He didn't share this clue with Dumbledore. He didn't alert McGonagall or any member of the Order. He kept it to himself like a thief guarding a secret weapon. That decision marked the beginning of a dark path, a path not unlike the one Slytherins were known to tread. Harry's suspicions grew in silence, festering. When school resumed, he didn't confront Draco in the open. Instead, he spied. He lingered near corners, snuck into compartments, and clutched at straws. He used the invisibility cloak not just as protection, but as a blade. In the train carriage, Harry watched Draco bragging to his friends and, instead of ignoring it, took the bait. He followed him like prey. But the tables turned. Malfoy found him, petrified him, and left him broken-nosed beneath a cloak on the floor. If anything, this encounter only sharpened Harry's desire for vengeance. He didn't consider going to a teacher. He considered how to catch Draco next time. And so, he began to build his own private investigation, not unlike the silent scheming of Slytherins who valued resourcefulness over rules. He recruited Creature and Dobby, 2 house elves with no allegiance to school policies. He ordered them to spy on Malfoy, to follow him, to report his movements. This was not the righteous behavior of the chosen one fighting for truth and justice. It was strategy, cunning, manipulation. "You will follow Draco Malfoy," he instructed Creature in Half-Blood Prince, "and you will report to me." It was cold, it was efficient, it was Slytherin. He didn't stop there. He used every means available to him to corner Draco. He brewed up plans in secret, fed by his own desperation to expose the boy. When Draco vanished from the Marauders' map, Harry knew it meant something. Instead of confronting the matter through official channels, he obsessed over where Malfoy disappeared. He interrogated Moaning Myrtle, dug through rumors, tracked vanishing cabinets, and theorized obsessively. None of this was brave in the traditional sense, it was predatory. He waited for weakness and struck at it. Harry began to understand Malfoy's fear. He saw the twitch in his rival's eye, the trembling in his hands. He noticed how Draco avoided people and slipped into the room of requirement alone, and Harry exploited that. He didn't pause to ask why Malfoy was afraid. He didn't consider the possibility that this boy might be as trapped as he was. He only saw an enemy. And in Slytherin logic, an enemy must be undone before he undoes you. It is easy to forget that Gryffindors value fairness and transparency, but Harry gave Malfoy neither. He never confronted him directly unless pushed. He struck from the shadows. When he finally attacked Draco in the boys' bathroom with Sectum Sempra, it wasn't heroism, it was rage wrapped in panic. He hadn't intended to nearly kill him, but he had prepared the weapon long before the fight ever happened. The spell came from the Half-Blood Prince's textbook, a tool he had used selfishly for his own gain, without understanding its full power. He had used it in duels, in class, even to get ahead in potions. But against Malfoy it became a blade. He chose to use a spell that had no known effect, simply because it might give him the edge. That moment revealed not courage but ruthlessness. Draco bled on the cold tile floor, gasping, the water running red. And for the first time, Harry saw the real weight of what he had done. He hadn't just won a fight, he had nearly taken a life. He hadn't been defending himself. He had ambushed someone he'd been hunting for months. Blood spurted from Malfoy's face and chest as though he had been slashed with an invisible sword, the book says. The moment was brutal, it was merciless, and it was the culmination of a Slytherin campaign, not a Gryffindor crusade. Even Snape, the professor Harry hated most, was shaken by what he found. He punished Harry with fury, not because he hated him, but because he saw himself reflected in the boy. Too much power, not enough control. Snape confiscated the Half-Blood Prince's book, but the damage had been done. Harry had revealed that when pushed, when cornered, he did not rely on honor, he relied on dominance. He attacked from the shadows and used his rival's vulnerabilities against him. Throughout this year, Harry displayed the very traits Salazar Slytherin prized: cunning, determination, and an unflinching willingness to do what others would not. He ignored authority, rejected traditional paths to justice, and created his own methods. He didn't fight Draco on fair ground. He stalked him, laid traps, and used forbidden knowledge. He read his enemy like a predator studying prey. There's an old Slytherin saying, "Do what must be done regardless of the cost." Harry embodied this creed in the way he handled Draco. He knew the teachers wouldn't believe him without evidence. He knew the Order had more pressing concerns. So he took matters into his own hands. He didn't fight for glory or recognition. He fought to eliminate a threat. That's not heroism, that's strategy. His friends, Ron and Hermione, were uneasy with his obsession. They questioned his methods. But Harry pushed forward. He didn't explain, he didn't justify. He acted with single-minded purpose. He saw weakness in Draco and he pressed it, again and again, until something broke. And still, even after the bathroom incident, Harry didn't let go. He didn't take it as a warning sign. He doubled down. He watched the room of requirement more intently. He questioned ghosts. He imagined maps. The war had become personal. It was no longer about Voldemort or Death Eaters. It was about one boy hiding one secret, and Harry had decided he had to uncover it, no matter the cost. That level of focus, that disregard for rules and reputation, is what defines many of Hogwarts' most dangerous minds. Tom Riddle, too, began his journey with an obsession, unlocking the secrets others overlooked. Harry walked dangerously close to that same fire. The difference was only in intent, not in method. When Dumbledore finally learned of Draco's task, to assassinate him, Harry felt vindicated. But the way he got there left scars. He had used fear as fuel, he had preyed on anxiety, he had turned a school rivalry into a full-scale surveillance operation. He didn't defeat Draco, he broke him. That's the unspoken truth. Draco didn't fail because he was weak. He failed because Harry cornered him, exposed him, pressured him until he cracked. The bathroom scene wasn't a duel, it was a confession. Draco bled not only because of a spell, but because Harry had forced him to the edge. And in that final moment when Snape stepped in to finish what Draco couldn't, Harry saw the price of his own methods. Dumbledore fell from the tower, and nothing Harry had done could stop it. Slytherin isn't defined by evil, it's defined by efficiency, by outcome, by results over rules, and Harry, in his darkest hour, adopted all of that. He became what he needed to be to uncover the truth. He sacrificed the appearance of innocence for the reality of control. He hunted with teeth bared and eyes sharp. That's why, years later, when people speak of Harry Potter's greatness, they rarely speak of this year. It doesn't fit the narrative. The boy who lived shouldn't be the boy who spied. But for those who watched closely, this was the year Harry stopped being a child. He stopped playing fair. He stepped into the shadows, and in that darkness, he didn't just survive, he conquered, like a Slytherin. Number 24 sabotaged Umbridge's regime through lies and rebellion. When Dolores Umbridge took control of Hogwarts in Harry Potter's 5th year, the castle ceased to be a sanctuary. Ministry-backed, wrapped in pink and dripping with cruelty behind a sugary smile, Umbridge represented not just authority, but tyranny. Most students bristled, some rebelled quietly, but Harry Potter did something else. He lied, schemed, covered his tracks, and led a resistance. Not like a brave Gryffindor charging into battle, but like a true Slytherin, working in the shadows, undermining power from within. The Harry Potter we saw during Umbridge's regime was not merely brave. He was cunning, defiant in a calculated way, and dangerously persuasive. His behavior during that year pulled back the curtain on traits Hogwarts' sorting hat may have glimpsed long ago, when it paused, just for a moment, wondering whether Harry belonged in Slytherin. It began the moment Harry returned to school after Voldemort's return, and discovered that the Ministry had inserted Umbridge as the new defense against the dark arts teacher. From their very first lesson, Harry saw through the polite facade. She refused to teach real magic. She issued decrees. She surveyed students like livestock. And when Harry dared to mention that Voldemort had returned, she punished him with a detention so cruel it bordered on sadism. I must not tell lies. The words carved into the back of his hand by a cursed quill were meant to break his spirit. Instead, they awakened something deeper, his refusal to submit. But he didn't respond with open war. He responded with strategy. Harry lied, repeatedly, and not just to protect himself. He became comfortable with subterfuge. When questioned by Umbridge about his activities, he gave her false information. He deflected. He protected others. During the formation of Dumbledore's army, an underground group formed to learn actual defensive magic, Harry became its secret leader, not out of a desire for glory, but with the precise goal of defying Umbridge's authority while avoiding detection. This wasn't recklessness, it was organized rebellion. He used the room of requirement, a place that shifted its shape to meet a need, as their meeting spot. That room could not be found by anyone not looking for it in exactly the right way. A strategic choice, cunning in the best Slytherin tradition. The list of participants in Dumbledore's army was hidden using a clever enchantment crafted by Hermione Granger, but Harry was the heart of the operation. He selected the time and location of meetings. He gave each member practical lessons, going beyond theory, making sure they could defend themselves in case of attack. When the group was betrayed by Marietta Edgecombe, Harry never revealed who else was involved. He protected his friends through silence and misdirection. Slytherins understand that power lies in knowledge and in knowing when to speak and when to hold your tongue. Harry had learned this lesson by necessity, and he applied it with quiet expertise. He showed a particular Slytherin flair in how he exploited the limitations of the school's rules and Umbridge's ignorance. For example, when she instituted the educational decrees, tightening control over clubs, communication, and even student speech, Harry and his allies always found a way around them. He consulted with Dobby the house elf to locate the room of requirement. He kept information tightly compartmentalized. No one student knew everything, which protected the group if anyone were captured or questioned. These are not the actions of a bold, brash hero. They are the methods of someone who understands the value of secrecy, deception, and manipulation. Harry also began to understand how to use fear as a tool. He didn't instill fear in his enemies like Voldemort, but he learned how to present himself as someone not easily threatened. Even as Umbridge grew more dangerous, recruiting the inquisitorial squad, issuing detentions with increasing violence, Harry met her intimidation with defiance, cloaked in civility. He answered her questions calmly, even as he lied. He gave her the appearance of obedience while planning her downfall behind her back. When cornered, he played dumb. When watched, he pretended to be compliant. All the while, the army trained. He also engaged in psychological warfare. The mere existence of the DA, once it became rumor, undermined Umbridge's authority. Students whispered about a secret resistance. They looked to Harry not as a reckless Gryffindor, but as a leader who had outwitted the school's most oppressive figure. This created confusion among Umbridge's allies and planted doubt in her mind. Who was on her side? Who wasn't? How could she suppress something invisible, intangible, hidden in the very walls of the castle? Harry created not just a rebellion, but a myth, one rooted in strategic silence. There's a distinct moment where Harry's Slytherin instincts truly surfaced. After Umbridge caught him using the fireplace in her office to speak with Sirius Black, she demanded answers. She brought in Veritaserum, attempted to use force. Harry knew exactly what was at stake. He resisted, not with shouting, but with evasion. He didn't crack. Instead, he pretended ignorance, gave misleading answers, and manipulated the situation just long enough to avoid disaster. Few Gryffindors could lie under pressure. Harry did so convincingly despite the danger because he understood that telling the truth was a luxury they couldn't afford. His most Slytherin moment came when he tricked Umbridge into leaving her office. In the Forbidden Forest, he baited her into following him by pretending he knew the location of a secret weapon. This was pure manipulation. He knew Umbridge's thirst for control would override her caution. He used her arrogance against her. Leading her into the Centaur's territory, Harry orchestrated her downfall with precision. When the Centaurs seized her, it wasn't luck, it was a plan executed with Slytherin-style foresight. He didn't attack her directly. He led her into a trap, let others do the dirty work, and walked away clean. There's something deeply Slytherin about using your enemy's strengths as weapons against them. Umbridge's paranoia, her obsession with rules, her need to dominate. Harry turned these traits against her time and again. He provoked her into mistakes, pushed her toward extremes that made her unpopular even among her allies. The Slytherin way is often about survival through cleverness, and Harry ensured that the DA survived longer than any open rebellion could have. Even his interactions with authority figures reflected this evolution. When confronted by Cornelius Fudge, Minister of Magic, Harry didn't shout or argue. He stayed silent, observant, and let Dumbledore control the narrative. Slytherins know when to yield the spotlight for strategic gain. Harry allowed others to speak for him when it was beneficial, conserving his energy and protecting his secrets. He wasn't seeking glory, he was seeking effectiveness. The Sorting Hat once said, "You could be great, you know, it's all here in your head, and Slytherin will help you on the way to greatness." This wasn't empty flattery. During 5th year, Harry demonstrated that greatness didn't always look like bold action or fearless declarations. Sometimes it looked like whispering a lie at the right moment. Sometimes it meant hiding your strength until the right time. Sometimes it meant building alliances in the dark and striking only when victory was certain. The Gryffindor house is often defined by bravery, but Slytherins understand that bravery without cunning is suicide. Harry, during his 5th year, did not throw himself at the front gates. He operated like a double agent. He wore the face of a compliant student while coordinating a parallel structure of resistance. This duality is the hallmark of a Slytherin mind, and Harry did it all without being caught, at least not until the damage had already been done. His eventual capture didn't dismantle the DA, nor did it cost him his position in the eyes of the students. If anything, it elevated his reputation. When Dumbledore took the fall for the organization, Harry let him. He didn't protest. He understood that Dumbledore's removal was part of a larger game, and that keeping the DA alive mattered more than defending his innocence. This level of political thinking was far beyond the impulsive boy who once charged into the Chamber of Secrets. Harry didn't just lead, he cultivated loyalty. Students followed him not because he was the chosen one, but because he gave them something Umbridge could not: the truth, empowerment, a sense of control. This was leadership not built on legend, but on results. Each student walked out of those secret meetings stronger, more confident. That kind of influence is difficult to earn and deeply Slytherin in its structure. Influence, once earned, becomes a weapon. In one of the book's most telling moments, Harry reflects on the need to teach others how to fight, not because he wants to, but because no one else will. This is a calculated sacrifice. It isn't born of pride or bravery, but necessity. He knows he's the only one who can do it, and he does so with a grim sense of duty. That practicality, that understanding of what must be done even when it's unpleasant, is what separates the naive from the effective. Again, it's not the traditional Gryffindor trait, it's the mark of someone who sees the chessboard clearly. By the end of that year, Umbridge's influence had crumbled. The DA had survived. Harry had outmaneuvered a regime within the walls of a magical school and came out stronger. His actions weren't always clean, they weren't always noble, but they were effective, deliberate, and methodical. That year, Harry learned how to fight without a wand, how to lie without blinking, and how to resist without shouting. He learned, in essence, how to win a war the Slytherin way. Even though the Sorting Hat placed Harry in Gryffindor, the question remains whether that decision was final. When we look at his actions under Umbridge's regime, it's impossible to deny that he thrived not through bravery alone, but through tactics that Salazar Slytherin would have admired. Harry was more than brave. He was calculating, loyal to his circle, secretive, and adaptive. He didn't just survive the system, he rewired it from within. Number 25. Let Ron suffer to teach him a lesson. Of all the moments that tested Harry Potter's character, few were as revealing as the cold, painful aftermath of Ron Weasley's departure during the Horcrux hunt. Ron left in anger and bitterness, pushed to the brink by the Horcrux's influence and the hopelessness of their situation. He accused Harry of having no plan, of dragging them on a pointless quest, and of not suffering the same way others did. And then he vanished. That night, with Hermione crying in silence by the fire, Harry didn't shout after Ron or chase him into the rain. He didn't weep or argue or plead. He stood still, staring into the dark. And in that single motionless hour, Harry made a choice that betrayed not the Gryffindor inside him, but the quiet cunning of a true Slytherin. The silence that followed Ron's departure was not the silence of a broken heart. It was the silence of strategy. Harry, raised in emotional deprivation, had long ago learned how to use stillness as armor, how to wield it like a weapon. In that moment, he knew that words could only cheapen the pain. If he had begged Ron to stay, he would have surrendered power. If he had shown vulnerability, he would have opened wounds he could not close. Instead, he allowed Ron to leave with nothing but the weight of his own words echoing behind him. It wasn't cowardice, it was control. And while Hermione wept and raged, Harry remained composed. He gave no speeches, he made no excuses. He understood something neither Hermione nor Ron ever truly grasped. People suffer more from their own conscience than from confrontation. The most devastating punishment Harry could offer Ron was not to chase him, but to allow him to sit in silence with the consequences of his betrayal. It was a master stroke of emotional manipulation, not born of malice, but of intuition. This wasn't the first time Harry used silence as a strategic tool, but it was the first time he used it to regain an ally. It was a calculated play. Deep inside, he understood Ron's personality, proud, insecure, and desperate to matter. By saying nothing, by never justifying himself, Harry left a void in Ron's world, a void that could only be filled by guilt and the desire to make amends. It was a Slytherin move in Gryffindor clothing, an act that wielded absence as influence. When Ron returned, shame-faced, drenched in regret, and expecting either rage or rejection, Harry gave him neither. He offered forgiveness like it was nothing, without ceremony or drama. All's forgiven, his actions said, even if the words never came. And in that moment, Harry re-established dominance in their friendship. He became the stronger one, not because he withheld love, but because he gave it freely after being abandoned. That subtle power play would have made Salazar Slytherin proud. There is a misconception that Slytherins are heartless, but the truth is more complex. Slytherins feel deeply, they simply learn to channel emotion into leverage. Harry's ability to read Ron's psyche, to predict the impact of his silence, and to receive him back with moral grace was not an act of bravery or kindness alone. It was a demonstration of influence, of knowing how to twist emotional energy into strength. The book never spells it out, but the clues are there. In the Deathly Hallows, the night after Ron leaves is described with telling minimalism. Hermione cried silently. Harry stared into the fire. No internal monologue, no desperate longing, just fire and silence. Harry wasn't heartless, he was calculating. He allowed the fire to speak for him, knowing that Ron would picture that same fire on lonely nights, haunted by the decision to walk away. Harry's silence became a symbol. It whispered into Ron's memory. You walked out. You weren't chased, you weren't needed. That ghost of independence, of not needing Ron, bit deeper than any angry words could. Harry had shifted the emotional balance, and when Ron returned, it was not as an equal, but as someone who had something to prove. In that way, Harry manipulated the narrative of their friendship. He transformed Ron's betrayal into a lesson, not by punishing him, but by making forgiveness cost Ron his pride. Slytherin values cleverness, resourcefulness, and the ability to read people. Harry embodied all of these. He didn't just get Ron back, he made sure Ron would never walk away again. Even Hermione, ever perceptive, never commented on this dynamic. She was too wrapped in her own grief. But one wonders, did she notice the cool detachment with which Harry moved forward after Ron left? Did she sense the calculation in his silence? It wasn't apathy, it was design. He knew Ron's guilt would grow in the quiet. This strategy also protected Harry. By not pleading with Ron, he preserved his dignity. He remained the moral center of the trio. When Ron returned, it was Harry who looked generous, loyal, and noble. But beneath that noble mask was the mind of someone who had engineered the entire outcome. It wasn't manipulation for cruelty's sake, it was manipulation in service of a larger goal. And this is where the Slytherin brilliance lies, not in deceit, but in orchestration. Harry didn't lie, he didn't deceive. He simply knew that emotions left untouched ferment into action. He allowed Ron's guilt to age, to mature, until it became unbearable. And when Ron returned, he did so not for Harry's sake, but to escape his own remorse. What Harry did, essentially, was weaponize loyalty. He knew that Ron would never find peace until he came back, and by not interfering, by not making the road easier, Harry ensured that Ron's return would feel earned. It's a tactic that speaks volumes about Harry's emotional intelligence and his Slytherin core. Even Dumbledore would have recognized the elegance of the move. A Gryffindor might rush to fix a broken bond. A Slytherin lets it break, knowing that when it heals, it will be stronger and under their control. Harry was no puppet master, but he understood the rhythm of people's hearts. That is a power few Gryffindors ever claim. The episode with Ron wasn't an outlier. Harry had shown similar traits throughout the series, his ability to bluff in front of Snape, to outwit Umbridge, to pretend compliance while harboring rebellion. All these were hallmarks of cunning. But the Ron episode was special because it was personal. It wasn't about defeating an enemy, it was about guiding a friend back into his orbit, without force, without demand, only silence. In The Half-Blood Prince, the Sorting Hat warns of inter-house unity, and yet in Harry we see the merging of houses most clearly. He has the heart of a Gryffindor, the loyalty of a Hufflepuff, the wit of a Ravenclaw, and the strategy of a Slytherin. The Ron episode is a testament to this blend. It's easy to miss, but once seen, it cannot be unseen. When Ron destroyed the Locket Horcrux, it was not just a victory over Voldemort, it was a symbolic cleansing. The Horcrux had preyed on Ron's insecurities, driving him away. By killing it, Ron wasn't just destroying a fragment of dark magic, he was atoning. And Harry allowed that atonement to happen without resistance. That's how he won, not through confrontation, but through restraint. It's tempting to see Harry as purely noble. But the truth is richer. His nobility is often informed by instinct, yes, but also by strategy. He doesn't control others with power, he controls them with perception. That's why people follow him, that's why Ron came back, and that's why in this quiet episode by the forest fire, we see the glint of silver and green beneath the red and gold. Harry Potter's most Slytherin act wasn't born in battle, it was born in absence, in the moment he chose not to beg. That choice reverberated through their friendship forever. It taught Ron that loyalty is fragile. It taught Harry that silence can speak louder than pleading. And it taught us all that the line between Gryffindor and Slytherin is not a wall, it's a thread, stretched taut across the fire. Number 26. Hid the Horcrux mission from the Order. In the frozen silence of Shell Cottage, Harry Potter stood by the window, watching waves shatter against the rocks. The world was unraveling. Voldemort was no longer just a distant shadow. He was everywhere. Ministries had fallen, friends had vanished. Yet Harry held a secret so vast and dangerous, he dared not speak it aloud to anyone except two people, Hermione Granger and Ron Weasley. Even as the Order of the Phoenix regrouped, waiting for leadership, waiting for a plan, Harry withheld the one truth that mattered most. The Horcruxes, the fragments of Voldemort's soul, scattered across the magical world like ticking bombs. It was a decision made with cold logic, a decision rooted not in Gryffindor bravery, but in the sharp cunning that Salazar Slytherin would have admired. For a boy who had spent years diving headfirst into danger, this calculated withholding of information revealed a different side to Harry. In this moment, he wasn't the reckless hero charging into the fray. He was a strategist, one who weighed risk and consequence, who understood that trust, though noble, could also be a liability. He recognized that the more people knew about the Horcruxes, the greater the danger of that knowledge falling into the wrong hands. The Order had spies, traitors, and gaps in its armor. Mundungus Fletcher had already betrayed trust for a sack of stolen goods. Who else might be listening? Harry's decision wasn't just about strategy, it was about control. He had learned, sometimes painfully, that knowledge in the wrong hands could be fatal. Dumbledore himself had lived with the consequences of giving too much power to others. Harry had absorbed this lesson deeply. As early as his 5th year, he had watched as the prophecy about him and Voldemort was mishandled, hidden by adults, and then revealed at great cost. When Sirius died at the Department of Mysteries, Harry realized how dangerous partial truths could be. So when the truth about Horcruxes came to him, he decided that no one else would bear the burden unless absolutely necessary. Only Ron and Hermione were brought into his confidence, and even with them the revelations came gradually. He told them not only because he trusted them, but because he needed them. They had proven themselves loyal beyond question. Hermione had fought off Death Eaters in the Department of Mysteries. Ron had stood beside him against a giant chessboard, a basilisk, and more. But even within their trio, Harry maintained a grip on the flow of information. He didn't tell them everything Dumbledore had shown him in the pensive. He filtered. He shaped. He decided what mattered most for the mission and what could be left behind. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, the secrecy surrounding the Horcruxes is clear. While the Order scrambles to defend key locations and protect Harry himself, Harry slips away under cover of darkness without revealing the true purpose of his quest. When asked what he is doing, he simply says, "I have to finish what Dumbledore started." But even that is vague. He does not say Horcruxes. He does not mention the possibility of 7 pieces of soul. He does not name Nagini. His silence isn't cowardice, it's calculation. And that calculation mirrors the behavior of history's most cunning Slytherins. Tom Riddle, too, moved in shadows, hiding his greatest secrets in plain sight, manipulating others without revealing the full picture. Severus Snape, perhaps the most complex Slytherin of all, lived a life defined by secrets, shielding his true allegiance even from the Dark Lord himself. Like them, Harry became a master of compartmentalization, of keeping the vital pieces of truth just out of reach from the world around him. This is not to say that Harry became like Voldemort. The motivations were different. But the methodology, strikingly similar. Harry understood that victory required more than courage. It required foresight, restraint, and an acceptance that not all allies could be trusted. When Lupin and Kingsley fought on the front lines, they did so blind to the true war being waged. When Arthur and Molly Weasley set wards on the Burrow, they believed the threat was direct attack. But Harry knew the real battle was internal, spiritual. He carried the knowledge of soul magic and the eerie truth that Voldemort could not die until every last Horcrux was destroyed. There's a moment, deep in the woods, when Ron accuses Harry of not knowing what he's doing. Harry is furious, not because Ron is wrong, but because there's a part of him that recognizes the weight of command. "What did you expect, Ron?" he says. "We'd be staying at a 5-star hotel, finding a Horcrux every other day. You thought you knew everything." But in truth, Harry did know more than he let on. He carried Dumbledore's notes. He alone had pieced together the location of the locket, the cup, the diadem. Even as Ron and Hermione scrambled for answers, Harry followed his own trail, half instinct, half memory. No one from the Order was consulted when they broke into the Ministry of Magic. Harry made the call. He decided who would go. He mapped the route. And when things fell apart, he didn't go running to Grimmauld Place for help. Instead, he vanished further into the wilderness. It was the mark of a lone operator, someone who trusts his mission more than his allies. Even Snape, watching from afar, must have seen in Harry the telltale signs of Slytherin discipline. The boy was no longer acting on emotion, he was acting on vision. Consider, too, Harry's treatment of Dumbledore's secrets. After the headmaster's death, he did not reveal what he had learned about the Deathly Hallows. He kept the story of the Elder Wand to himself. When Griphook demanded the sword of Gryffindor, Harry agreed to lie, to manipulate, to hold back. And when Ollivander asked about wand law, Harry carefully withheld what he knew about the wand allegiance. "It's complicated," he said. Another way of saying, "I won't tell you everything." These choices paint a portrait of a young man who understood the corrosive nature of too much knowledge in too many hands. He had watched friends die for secrets they didn't fully understand. He had seen betrayal bloom in the name of trust. So he chose the path of the serpent, not for ambition, not for domination, but for survival. Slytherins are survivors first, and in the hunt for the Horcruxes, Harry learned to be one too. The Horcrux mission was never authorized by the Order. It was not discussed in strategy meetings or shared in coded letters. Even after Lupin came to the trio in the woods, begging to be involved, Harry refused. "No," he said, "this is something I have to do." And while that refusal stung, it was a necessary act. To Harry, the stakes were too high. If even one person betrayed them, intentionally or not, Voldemort would win. And Voldemort was watching. Through Harry's mind, through visions and dreams, the Dark Lord searched. He saw Gregorovitch, Grindelwald, even the snowy peaks of Nurmengard. But he never saw the true hunt, never saw the trio's desperate journey through forests and fields. Because Harry had learned to wall off his mind, not just from legilimency, but from the world. This is a skill few Gryffindors ever master, but Slytherins, they're born for it. At Malfoy Manor, even under torture, Harry did not speak of the mission. When Bellatrix Lestrange interrogated them, Hermione screamed in pain, but Harry remained silent. He knew the risk, he knew the stakes, and he endured. This is not just bravery, this is discipline, control, the very traits Salazar Slytherin prized in his students. By the time Harry confronted Voldemort in the Forbidden Forest, he had long accepted the role of Keeper of Secrets. He did not tell Ron and Hermione about the Resurrection Stone in the Snitch. He did not speak of his final plan. He walked to his death alone, not because he lacked friends, but because he understood that the path ahead required total clarity and no interference. "I am about to die," he told himself quietly, and walked forward. Even after the final battle, Harry did not boast about what he had done. He did not explain the wand allegiance to Kingsley. He did not lecture McGonagall on Dumbledore's plans. He let others believe what they needed to believe. The truth, he knew, belonged only to those who earned it. And in that again, he mirrored Slytherin values: power used carefully, information kept locked, control maintained at all costs. The Sorting Hat once said that Harry could have done well in Slytherin, and at the time Harry rejected the idea, afraid of what it meant. But years later, when he acted in secret, when he shaped the war from the shadows, he proved that the hat wasn't wrong. "You would have done well in Slytherin," it had whispered. Not because Harry was dark, not because he was selfish, but because he understood that sometimes the wisest path is not to shout the truth, but to guard it with your life. Harry Potter was never just a Gryffindor. In those dark months, wandering the countryside with Horcruxes in mind and silence on his lips, he embodied the essence of Salazar Slytherin's ideal student: clever, discreet, strategic. He played a long game, not for glory, but for victory. And in doing so, he walked a path that only few truly recognized for what it was: the path of the serpent, tread in silence, but carved in triumph.